I'm slow of speech and tongue. And this makes Moses a relatable character, where we're making up excuses. I can't speak. No, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. And yesterday we said, your excuses is nothing compared to what God says about you.
Welcome to the Good Book Club. We're doing Exodus chapter 4. Can you see my hand in the yellow?
Chapter 4. This is the continuation of the conversation at the burning bush. And Moses asks, what if they do not believe me? And God asks, what is in your hand? And he says, a staff. And he says, throw it on the ground. And what happens?
It turns into a snake.
A snake. And what does Moses do?
He jumps away and runs away. No, it doesn't run away all the way.
I asked you yesterday, what would you do if a staff turned into a snake?
Oh, cool. I have never seen something like that
I would run. I would run away. And Indiana Jones would run away too because he's afraid of snakes. Did you know? Okay, I almost trailed off to Indiana Jones.
Let's not trail off.
But it turns into a snake, and then God says, take it by the tail, and what happened?
It turns back into a stick.
Boom.
A big stick, which is called a staff.
A staff. What does that reveal about God?
It shows that he has control in morphing, shape-shifting. Well, he has control over to the molecular structure of absolutely anything. He can change anything into anything. Wow. Science, baby.
Science, baby.
God is science. If you think about it.
God is above science.
He's above it. He is.
That's actually a really cool thought. And a snake was a symbol of power for the Egyptians. Because in a way, this also showed that God has power over power.
Yes.
And then he turns that symbol of power into a walking stick, literally.
It's really cool.
And he did this to have Moses prepared to show signs to Pharaoh and the Israelites. But the other sign was he had to put his hand in his cloak. And when he took it out, his hand was leprous. It was a term used for skin diseases and it was as white as snow.
So it was
sick.
It was basically about to decay or something.
So, you know, when you're really sick, you're so bleak in the face, it's white. That was his hand, and it may have been rotting at that point.
When I heard that term for the first time, that was when I was like a toddler, I thought his hand turned into a skeleton.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, right, that's true. You said that yesterday.
Skeleton hand just coming out.
No, it wasn't Pirates of the Caribbean. But then when he put it back and took it out of his cloak again, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. So that shows God has power over diseases.
That's really cool.
And it's kind of a reference to one of the plagues. I believe it's plague number 6, the outbreak of boils.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. You know we spoil the Bible.
Read your Bible if you don't want spoilers.
Just read the entire book of Exodus, then you're fine for the rest of this series. But he showed those signs, and then the other sign was that if they don't believe these signs, then take water from the Nile River, not the Nile, the Nile River.
Yeah, the Nile.
The Nile. And pour it on the dry ground. And then the water you take from the river will become blood on the ground.
Therefore, they denial the Nile.
Because Nile is a false god.
Yes.
And you're denying denial. You get it?
Yeah.
There we go. But why water into blood? Why do you think this detail happened here in verse 9?
Because blood is thicker than water. Well, that's actually just a term used in some languages. But I don't know. It symbolizes death.
Yes.
Well, life also.
Life as well and death. And the water of the Nile turning into blood is a reference to the first plague. Which is quite cool because the first plague only happens in chapter 7.
Is that where Bloody Mary comes from?
No,
because
definitely not.
In the Prince of Egypt, I want to call the henchmen or the wizards, I don't know, but they put some stuff in the water and then brought in a cup to the Pharaoh, You remember that in the
Yes,
movie?
yes.
So it's like, oh, here's a Bloody Mary drink.
No, no, it was not the Bloody Mary drink. But you're actually right. The magicians also replicated
Magicians,
some of
yeah.
the plagues. They couldn't do every single one, but they did actually replicate the first one. We're getting ahead of ourselves because this book is incredible.
Yes.
But the other sign was turning the water of the Nile into blood. And then verse 10, Moses makes an excuse and says he's not eloquent and he is slow of speech and tongue. He should get someone else. What do you think he meant by slow of speech?
Well, I think about slow in speech. Some people think that they stuttered or he stuttered, but it sometimes, when I reflected that to, let's say, to myself, because I've noticed with English, I am also slow in speech because it's almost like a buffer between my brain and mouth or tongue that just snail, or I struggle to pronounce the words. It comes with practice, but also God uses you in a way because here we are doing this Good Book Club
It's fantastic.
podcast, spreading the good news and the stories, what's in the Bible, all the books, all the chapters and stuff.
It's cool because he says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." And this makes Moses a relatable character, where we're making up excuses. I can't speak. No, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. And yesterday we said, your excuses is nothing compared to what God says about you.
He's gonna make use of you because he created you.
Because God's comeback is, the Lord's comeback is, who gave human beings their mouths, who makes them deaf or mute, who gives them sight or makes them blind. Is it not I, Yahweh? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say.
Because he has control over snakes and sticks. He also has
And
control
over
over sight and death. Death. Well, death also, but
death, like
yeah,
this death.
yeah, death and death. Yeah,
Yes,
it's over
both
both. Yeah,
deaths.
it's control over everything, and that pops up the question about free will. But that's for another episode.
And the thing is, God makes these big statements. Who has power over the blind, the deaf, the mute? And Moses still says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else."
The audacity, but also it's nerve-wracking to me, God. You asking me to do that. You asking me.
And the thing is, Moses was 80 years old at this time.
80 years old, and he probably still believes by that time that he has the reputation of killing someone in Egypt.
That's very true.
So it's like, do you want me to go back to where I killed someone?
Yes. It was likely what he thought, and he could have said, "I'm too old for this," but he never said that, but he could have said it. And it says Yahweh's anger burned against Moses or kindled against Moses. He said, "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He's already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you." And he used his brother to help him speak. And he says that Moses will be like God to Aaron, meaning that Moses would tell him beforehand what to say, and then Aaron would speak.
Wow.
So God sent his brother, who is the supporting character of
Nice.
the protagonist. But later Moses does get confidence, and then he does the talking, which is character development.
Yes.
Such a well-written story.
It is. Wow.
And so far, the best adapted movie of this is The Prince of Egypt, which is an animated movie.
Yes.
Exodus, Gods and Kings.
I
Some
haven't
things,
seen it yet.
no, I was
have not.
disappointed. There are some things like the 10 plagues were almost perfect, but then the rest, I thought, what are they doing? So, yeah. But anyway, he met his brother, who was 3 years older than him, and his sister was 7 years older
Yes,
than
7.
Moses. And when Moses returned to Egypt, he went back to his father-in-law, Jethro. This is verse 18. And he says, "Let me go back to my people in Egypt so that he can go to them again." And he took his wife and his sons, and the staff of God was in his hand. And then there's this... passage where the Lord talks about Israel being his firstborn son, and then he says that if you don't let them go, I will kill your firstborn son, talking to Pharaoh. And this is a reference to the last 10th plague already.
Again, spoilers.
Spoilers. And that's exactly what happened. The 10th plague was Pharaoh's firstborn son getting killed.
God gives warnings.
He does.
He gives warnings, and it's up to you to listen or not. And Pharaoh definitely, spoilers, did not.
He did not listen. And it's interesting because yesterday we realized the first and the last plague are referenced in chapter 4 already.
Yes.
And the last plague only happens in chapter 12. And this is chapter 4.
8 more chapters to go.
That's crazy. That is quite crazy if you think about it. And from here on, it's a weird passage, honestly. We don't understand it, to be honest. But it says that the Zipporah, Moses' wife, took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin, touched Moses' feet with it, and says, "You are a bridegroom of blood." And she called him a bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. And I don't understand it. It might have been a thing of God wanted him to circumcise his son, and then Zipporah did it instead.
At the age of 80, apparently.
Well, Moses was 80, and his son would have probably been 40, more or less, at this time.
Which makes it weird.
Which makes it very weird. So just watch the God Questions video linked in the description, because they have an entire video dedicated to this very weird passage, because we don't quite get it.
Yeah, we don't get this peculiar
section
of the story.
It's weird. But let's move on from that part. From here, he says that Aaron and Moses met up and they were reunited, and they went to the elders of Israel, verse 29, and they said everything that the Lord said to Moses, and they performed the signs of the staff turning into a snake, then back to a staff, the water into blood, and the leprous hand. And when they heard and saw these signs and that the Lord was concerned about them, they bowed down and worshipped. So they were convinced God is here. We're gonna make it.
We're gonna make it.
Yeah.
That's the end.
That's the end of chapter 4.
That's where it ends.
And in chapter 5, we're gonna talk about bricks without straw and God promising deliverance. But for now, that is chapter 4.
See you in chapter 5.